Hello and welcome back to Tough Talk. I'm Brian. I have bipolar disorder and I have a lot to talk about. Today, in the news from ScienceDaily.com, economic benefits of dropping mental health stigma. Basically, there is a Rand Corporation study that says that for every $1 invested in stigma-related reduction efforts, the state could receive an estimated, they say should receive an estimated $36 through higher tax collections. So for every $1, they will be returned $36. Now, that's a significant return on investment. And all this is basically a large marketing effort, a marketing campaign to help educate people about mental illness and about how well-adjusted people with the disease are and how normal they are, and that they should deserve an equal chance at work. And I think that's fantastic, and it'll make a significant impact even on my life as I live in California. And I really hope that my state decides to do this. So that was in the news. That was something that jumped out at me. But today I want to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, because I mentioned in previous videos that I have post-traumatic stress disorder. It's affecting me currently, and I've had it for many years. Like 1 year after my diagnosis, and then 2 years since my last hospitalization in 2014. And I'd like to take the time to educate about what the symptoms are, and basically give my recommendation for how to treat it, how to get started at treating it. First of all, it doesn't make you a monster. It makes you very much afraid, and it's a lot more than that. But let's get started with the PTSD assessment test. This is from the Post-Traumatic Stress Foundation of America, and so this is the self-assessment test, and I'll have links to all of these web pages that I'm visiting right now. So right off the bat, it says re-experiencing symptoms, memories, and images of the traumatic events may intrude into the minds of those with PTSD. They occur suddenly without obvious cause. They are often accompanied with intense emotions such as grief, guilt, fear, or anger. Sometimes they can be so vivid that the person believes the trauma is actually reoccurring. And I've read through this list just before recording, and I've had nearly all, about, I'd say a good 98% of these symptoms, and there are quite a few here, so I may not read all of them. But something that affects me very frequently is nightmares, night terrors. I've had some last week. There's sometimes sleepwalking or sleep fighting. I don't have that. Unwanted daytime memories, images, thoughts, daydreams, flashbacks, feeling like you're reliving the traumatic event. Somatic is a term for brain function. There's a somatic function. Somatic flashbacks, physical pain, that would be something that manifests itself in your body, and so some people re-experience the pain that they went through. I'm familiar with that too. Fixated on an experience living in the past, in this case a war experience, because most people who go to war experience traumatic events and thus come back, and are the large majority of people that we know of with PTSD. Although it can affect anyone who has ever been in a life-threatening situation like I was at the hospital. My life was very much threatened. I felt very afraid. I thought I was going to die. Panic attacks, undefined dread or fear, phobias. And then there are avoidance symptoms. These symptoms are traumatized individuals attempt to avoid situations, people, or events that remind them of the trauma. They feel numb, emotionless, withdrawing into themselves, trying to shut down the painful memories and feelings. Friends and family feel rejected by them, as they are unable to show appropriate affection and emotion. How that's affected me personally? Well, I've avoided my family quite a bit. Like, if I'm in a very bad post-traumatic stress situation where I'm fighting a lot of flashbacks, then I will spend a lot of time away from my family. However, I've let them know exactly what's going on, so they know not to feel rejected and just to let me process it out before I'm well again and I'm able to spend time with them. So this can manifest itself as avoiding anyone or anything that reminds you of the traumatic event, physical emotion, reacting to things that remind you of the traumatic event, self-isolation, that's very common, or dread of social interaction, that's also very common, I've had that, anxiety in crowds, and traffic, yes. I have a lot of anxiety in traffic. Crowds, a little bit. But like when I'm driving, I have a lot of anxiety, and that obviously depends on how much I'm being affected by post-traumatic stress. It can come some weeks and it can go some other weeks. For me, it's because I'm at this stage of in my psychotherapy, in therapy, that I'm being treated very well, and a lot of my memories have basically been bled dry of the emotion, but I have still quite a few more, and sometimes they get more activated than others. So it can come and go too. It's not always a constant thing. It depends on what you're doing for treatment and so on, as to how severe it can be. There's also despair, depression, sadness, emptiness, loneliness, inability to trust others, very reluctant to talk about your traumatic event. I spent about a year and a half being very reluctant in therapy to even talk about it. I did try. I really put myself out there to try, but every time I did, it would re-traumatize me. I would relive the events. It would feel like it happened again to me, and then the PTSD symptoms would flare up. I would have terrible night terrors, and basically it would set me back, by weeks and months. So that's a very discouraging cycle to be in, but fortunately I stuck with it, and in therapy now we've come across a great technique that is working very well for me. The technique of therapy, the method of therapy may change depending on the individual, but once you find what works best, it's a wonderful experience having that burden like lift from you, and in pieces and in large chunks too. I can't wait till I'm all the way through it. There's also emotional numbness. I think I skipped one though. There's yes, lack of interest in motivation regarding employment, recreation, hobbies, relationships that were once close or intimate can be strained, cold, distant, requiring too much energy to maintain. Emotional numbness, flat, can't get happy or sad, dead inside feeling. Substance abuse to numb yourself. Yeah. And suicidal thoughts, suicide attempts, physical fatigue. Fortunately, I haven't been suicidal since before I was diagnosed. That I only had those thoughts because I didn't understand what was going on. Since my diagnosis, I know what's going on, so I don't have any reason. I know that there's a process to get better, and I believe in that process, and so thus I don't ever have any suicidal thoughts. However, I completely understand where they come from. It's an extremely painful experience to go through on a daily basis, reliving that traumatic event. So it's important to talk about that. There's a neglect and abandon for personal care, hygiene, nutrition, and exercise. I've done all of those to some pretty terrible extremes. One period of time after my hospitalization, it was within 1 month, and I basically didn't shower for 2 weeks. I didn't change my clothes either. Well, maybe I changed my clothes, but I didn't shower. for 2 weeks, and I really felt bad about myself. And the trouble with it is it's not just that you neglect or abandon personal care, it's that you feel sometimes that you don't deserve it. You don't deserve to eat, or you don't deserve, and it's a very strange psychological effect based on the severe trauma that was experienced. And it also depends on how you experience that trauma. If somebody was responsible for the abuse, that person, there's an abuser figure, it's more likely to trigger the feeling that you don't deserve to take care of yourself. And that's what it was. In my case, I had nurses and a whole staff that was in on basically the wrong thing. And because I experienced that, I felt this very strongly. But I got corrected very quickly. I told my therapist, we talked about it, had a whole session about it, and got to a point where I made it a priority to fight back against that, because I figured that it all starts here. If I can't take care of my hygiene, if I can't take care of my nutrition, if I can't start to exercise again, I've talked about exercise, I felt very strongly that if I didn't take care of those things at the core, at the foundation, then nothing I built after that would ever work. And then I very strongly felt that. So I want to share that idea, because if you have post-traumatic stress, or suspect that you have post-traumatic stress, or know anyone that you think has post-traumatic stress, if they are not taking care of their hygiene, nutrition, or exercise in very modest amounts, at least at the start, help make sure that they feel worthy of those things, worthy to take care of that. If you have it, you are worthy of taking care of yourself, worthy as anyone else. And you can beat this, you can fight this, but you got to start fighting it now. And if you're watching this and you're not, if you're sitting at the computer and you haven't, taken care of yourself in a while, get up and go take care of yourself. You can come back and watch this later. Arousal symptoms. So this is the last category of symptoms that, and arousal means fear of further trauma. This is basically your body's response. So if you have PTSD, your body's going to be in a heightened state of response, almost at all times. So you fear for further trauma. In my case, I really feared talking about my trauma in such a way that it would re-traumatize me, because that was a constant thing on my mind. So I was fearing talking about it. Some days it would be an hour till my appointment at therapy, and I fear going in to talk about what was going on. And that's just the reality of it. But I fought against it because I had to believe in the process. I had to give myself a chance. And that's the thing. If you have this condition, you can give yourself the chance at getting better. PTSD sufferers are always on the alert, on guard, jumpy, unable to sleep, angry, irritable. That doesn't mean that you are always those things. It just means that if you have that symptom, then it's to be expected that you always are experiencing that, because it's a very consistent disorder. For me, a lot of disturbed sleep. I was always on guard, jumpy, not always angry, often irritable, very often irritable. Many also have concentration and memory problems. I tried going to school shortly before my diagnosis, and I had a little bit of post-traumatic stress then. And I wanted to go to school after. However, the concentration and memory problems that I experienced made it almost impossible for me to do that. And I haven't been able to go to school since, and I probably won't until I'm cured from PTSD, but I believe that day will come. So some of these symptoms in the arousal category include anger, irritability, a short fuse, fits of rage, hypervigilance, always on guard, always need to be armed with a knife or a gun. So this would be more military personnel, but for someone who's like me, a civilian, and I've experienced post-traumatic stress, I've always felt like I need to close my fist, like be ready to fight, in some physical capacity. Not really that I desire the fight most of the time, well, pretty much all of the time, but more that I'm afraid that someone is going to bring the fight to me. So it's more out of a state of fear, okay? This doesn't mean that somebody's actually going to act on it. It's very rare that anyone with PTSD will actually act out. It's most likely that violence will come to them because they are so afraid, and afraid to act in their best interest if some violent event happens to them. So it's very misled if you think about some terrible incidents in the news. Those are extreme rarities. Okay, that's a 1 in a million situation. That's not what happens with people with PTSD. Most of them get hurt. They're not the people who do the hurting. They're easily startled, react to loud noises, jumpy. Substance abuse, to unnumb yourself. So you can use substance abuse to numb yourself. And, the effect of numbing, for instance, I smoked for about a year. And the smoking was, I was actually seeking the withdrawal symptoms, which made me very numb. And so I smoked very infrequently. But that numb feeling blocked out and shut down the constant flashbacks that I had. So, at the time, that was what I needed. But there are medicines, and there are anxiety medicines, anti-anxiety medicines that are better at doing that. And I highly recommend that you get one of those. Don't take up smoking. Don't do any of these other things, because they're not as effective and they don't target your mind quite as well as the medication. Reduced cognitive ability, slow thinking, confusion, poor problem solving, concentration, poor memory, trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, and insomnia. Night sweats, accelerated heart rate, rapid breathing, heart palpitations for no good reason. Yeah, that happens. Questions about an abandoned faith. That's a tough one, but it's up to everyone with post-traumatic stress to deal with themselves. Don't be too pushy on them. They're going through some very terrible stuff. Fear of becoming violent, provoking fights. Yeah, you have both fear of becoming violent. If you're always vigilant and you're expecting a fight, and you get yourself, well, it's not that it's happening to you. It's not that you're doing it, but if you're always in that state of expecting a fight, then you fear that you're becoming violent, and some people do become violent and provoke fights. There's homicidal thoughts as well in extreme cases. Like I said, it's not common that someone will actually become violent, but it is to be watched out for, because unlike any other acquired illness or mental disability, post-traumatic stress can push someone to that edge, but very rarely. Anniversary reaction to the anniversary of the event. There's a reaction, or the symptoms can worsen around that time. I know this is true, for myself. Every year, about the same time. See, it happened to me around, actually, I was there over the 4th of July, and there were commercials on the television, and so I have a severe averse response to any 4th of July commercials or material. It just makes me cringe inside. People with post-traumatic stress can become adrenaline junkies and taking excessive risks and getting hyped up. Because you're on a lot of adrenaline. If you have something to diffuse that, then it can help. It can help you process that in a way that's enjoyable rather than extremely painful. And in some cases, self-mutilation, cutting, and excessive tattooing happen. So that's it. That's all of the post-traumatic stress disorder assessment questions and symptoms. And if you go through that list and you check off about 5 or 10, or for me it would be most of them, then you may have post-traumatic stress disorder. How do you get treated? Well, I'm not going to read their recommendations. I'm just going to go based on my experience. Number 1, go to your doctor. Get an anxiety medication. Get something to help you calm down and stay calm. And the next thing you want to do is find a counselor. Find a therapist. Find a social worker. And you can find one through your insurance, or your health insurance, or you can find one yourself. But do try to get insurance to pay for it. It makes it a lot more affordable, especially in the long run. And then make sure that when you go to that therapist, that you don't just lock in with that person. Make sure that you have a good talking relationship, because that talking relationship is going to matter when treating post-traumatic stress. You have to feel connected and you have to feel safe with them. If you don't feel safe talking to them, you will never be able to have a decent crack at treating this disorder. The next thing you want to do is maybe, if you have some other mental illness, go to your psychiatrist and fill them in on the details. So that would be how I would get started. At home, treating yourself, take care of your hygiene, take care of your nutrition, and that would be a great starting point. The rest will sort of come as you go through therapy. Everyone's treatment is going to be a little bit different, but I guess the final thing I would mention is, if you have an addiction to anything, get treated for that. Quit the addiction. Because honestly, you don't need it. You probably only have it because of your post-traumatic stress. If you can start treating yourself with medication and therapy, then you can get better and you won't need that addiction. This is everything I have to say about the subject. I'm Ryan, and thank you for watching. Please share this with anyone that you think will be affected by it, with anyone who you think that might be educated by it. Thank you for tuning in today. This has been a very serious subject, so I hope it goes over well. I care about everyone out there, and I really hope that this helps. So thank you. Bye-bye.